Welcome to episode 6 of the E30 S62 Swap. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garagistics, and today we're going to be doing control arms and alignment. Stay tuned. These are the control arms, and I've got a suspension clunk. Let's remove these puppies. Let's replace those rubber bushings with some 80A poly bushings from Garagistics. Let's replace both control arms, and then let's do an alignment. Let's do an alignment in the air. Control arm is out, went out pretty effortlessly, and we now need to press on the Garagistics 80A poly mounts on the end there. So I got the old control arm in a press. I'm going to reuse the lollipops. This guy here is basically just like a little press mechanism that I had sourced, and the press will basically push down and press just the inner ring of the lollipop out to allow me to reuse this and press in the Garagistics 80A poly mounts. So this is what we're doing now to get the next step installed onto that control arm before we finally get it fully installed back in the car. So these are the Garagistics E30 80A poly bushings, no offset. I like those. I think that offers the most comfortable and sporty ride, but that's just my preference. And they now need to get pressed into the existing E30 lollipops. That's actually pretty easy to do. You can kind of literally line it up yourself, and you can kind of work it in yourself. It's really not that hard to do. It's a press fit for sure. Not necessarily as much of a press fit as the stock ones, but you can easily push these in. I don't even need the press for that, but I'll put them in and we'll throw them on. Okay, so we have a vise here, and we have this kind of set in place where we want it. Since it's not offset, we don't really worry about the location. It could be radially any direction we want it to be. And put it in there, lock, and just start pressing. And there you go. So when you're trying to thread a nylon lock nut onto a tapered thread, or taper into the thread, what's going to happen is it's going to spin on you once you get that resistance of the nylon part of the nut. So what you need to do is you need to essentially just jack it up. Now I'm using one of these jack stands, but you can use any type of floor jack to just put pressure on that taper. That'll prevent the stud from spinning when it starts to engage onto the nylon thread. So let's do that right now. So if you notice there, I was actually using two different wrenches. This one here is a indexing box wrench, which is really cool, really good to help, get the nut in fast and sloppy, right? But I don't usually like to use this for high torque application, so I switch to the regular box end wrench, and then that's when I really lay into it. So that's probably a good idea for you to do if you ever have these. You don't want to ruin these teeth, so you just want to use this for the application it's designed. It's not designed for high torque. Okay? All right, guys, so if you thought that was easy, replacing the control arms, this is even easier, the alignment. We're going to do it in the air with the two blue jack stands, and we're going to be using what's called alignment plates. And they have slots in front of the wheel and behind the wheel. And basically those alignment plates butt up against the tires. We're going to use a tape measure on the front and the back and ensure that our measurements are within spec when the steering wheel is centered inside the car. So what we want to do is we want to first loosen our tie rods. Just kind of break them, just so that when we do loosen and tighten them to move the wheels in and out, that it won't be too much of a jolt for the system. You can easily screw them in and out as you need. What we want is we want slight toe in on the E30. I don't remember what the spec is, but when I find it, I'll put it at the bottom of the screen. And we want the front to be slightly toe in behind, relative to behind the wheel. And I'll explain that as I'm doing it, but I'll show you that the toe in helps to center the wheel, helps to center the car and the alignment as you're going down the road. So let's get this thing hooked up, let's get it started, and let's see how it works. All right, so sitting there trying to align the front wheel, you can tell it is not straight, so let's straighten it out. Just like that. Restrictions apply. And turn it off. Make sure that locks in the straight position that you want it. This is as good as it's going to get. So now it's locked. All right. So now we need to take a look and see how the alignment falls. So I installed my two tape measures from one end to the other. As you can see, I have the tape measures installed on the upper slot there and the upper slot there. You can use the lower slots if you'd like. If you do that, then you have to use the lower slots on the other side. Okay, so I'm using the upper slots here. And let's see how this thing actually sits up against this Longacre alignment plate. Part of what makes an alignment so important is that everything is square. And part of that is to make sure that your alignment plates are centered in the wheel so that you don't get any type of parallelogramming or skewing of the measurements of the tape measure. So you want the tape measures to be as square as possible. And what that means is that on the slots that you pick, make sure that you make them as close to the inside as possible. You also want to make sure that your alignment plate is square and pushed up against the tire, because the tire is going to define the alignment here, not the wheel. And also, and finally, and most importantly, to prevent that parallelogramming I was talking about, you need to make sure that your plates are centered. The end of the plate here and the end of the plate here correspond to the sides or edges or the sidewalls of the tire. As you can see here, it's not off, it's off. It's skewed off to the side. So we need to bring this in, make sure that it's centered, and then push it back on, and then use the tape measures to pull and maintain pressure on the other side as well. It's kind of an art almost in order to align these, because it's going to be a lot of trial and error. Remember, you want the fronts, as I said earlier, to be slightly smaller, probably about 1/4 inch overall length than the back. That gives you that tiny bit of toe in that you want. So let's just see where the measurements line up and see where the chips fall. Okay, so let's take a look and see what the measurements are for the front and the rear. The fronts are 66 and 7/8. The rears are 67 and 3/8. That's a bit far. I think that the fronts are a little too small and the rears are a little too wide. I think that that's going to produce a really extreme toe-in condition, which is going to wear out the centers or insides of your tires. So what I need to do is I need to lengthen each of the tie rods just one turn perhaps and remeasure. So I had already loosened the lock nut here with a 21 millimeter, and now that leaves room for using a 13 millimeter on the actual hex portion of the tie rod, the inner tie rod, and you can screw it in and out. This doesn't do anything until you actually break the thread and start actually screwing the inner without moving the outer. So what we need to do is we need to lengthen and push this front of the tire out just a tiny bit, which means we have to lengthen this tie rod just a bit, which means we have to screw it out like this. going like this and pushing out just a tiny bit, just a half turn total is all you need. Realign the rack here, just like that. And we'll do the same thing for the other side. Lengthen it just a tiny bit, and we'll remeasure. All right, now that we lengthen the tie rods in the front just a tiny bit on either side, let's take another quick measure. 67 1/8. 67 1/4. That is exactly where I want it to be. It's basically just an 1/8 inch up, just a tiny bit in the front to make it just a slight toe in. Now that I've got it all set up, I'm going to tighten those tie rods and I am done. What kind of alignment will we have if we have camber plates and we don't measure the camber? So I have this thing called a fast track camber measurement tool. It's actually pretty slick. It kind of expands and contracts to go into the inside of the wheel well. Okay, kind of actually better to just like this, kind of, right? So you kind of put it into the wheel well and you expand it, set it, and then you measure to see what the camber is. So what we need to do first is we need to calibrate it so that when it's on a flat surface like the floor of this garage, it'll be 0, so that when we put it on the wheel, we'll know the exact camber, and then we can measure. I think I want -1.5 degrees, so I'm going to try to get that bubble right in the center. Let me show you. So this right here is the Fast Track's camber measurement tool, and essentially what it is, you kind of calibrate it on a flat surface like this. And there's a set screw on the right side that you can rotate and get that bubble that's right here as close to 0 as possible. So when you put it into the wheel wells, like here and here, and then there's another one up top, that it'll actually tell you the correct camber. And I really want like something like -1 to a -1.5. So let's just adjust this on the floor to make sure I get it as close to 0 as possible. Just like this. Okay, good. And then you kind of just tighten that guy up. Now we're good. Now let's install it on the wheel and see what it looks like. Okay, so now it's telling me it's right around -0.5 degrees. I kind of want to make that more like -1. So I'm gonna move this over and make this -1. So this is basically where you take the camber and measure it. So I'm going to loosen all 4 of these, and I'm going to push this in like this, actually the other way, this way, just a tiny bit to get it to that -1 degree that I'm looking for. All right, I've adjusted the camber, and you can see that it is just exactly at -1. Let's see how the other side turns out. It just so turns out that this guy is already hovering right in the -1 territory, so I am good. I am not going to be doing anything with this side, and now I am complete with the alignment. Steering wheel is straight, tie rods is straight with a slight toe in, and the camber is set at -1 degrees. I am ready for a test drive. Now you guys know how to change control arms and align your E30 all by yourself. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Please like, subscribe, comment to my channel. I appreciate all the comments, good and bad. Keep in touch, ask questions, let me know what you think. I love the feedback. Later, guys.